In Their Corner, youth sports, coaches, and parents. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mothers of Boys Survival Guide podcast. Each week, we bring you expert advice, real life stories, and practical tips to hopefully make some of the challenges of motherhood a little bit easier. I'm Cheryl Bond, your co host, along with Susie Shaw, TV producer and author of the book, Mothers of Boys Survival Guide. Hey, Suze.
Hi, Cheryl. I'm very excited about today's podcast. Who's our guest?
Today's guest is Matt Hogan, a respected coach who has led sports programs at University of Pennsylvania, Clarkson University, and St. Mary's High School. He also has been on the sidelines as an assistant coach at top-tier programs, including the U.S. Naval Academy, the University of Maryland, University of Delaware, and St. Mary's High School, where he earned MIAA Coach of the Year honors. Currently, he's the executive director of the Annapolis Hawks Club Lacrosse Program and Hogan Lax, a premier organization running top-level boys lacrosse tournaments in Maryland and Pennsylvania. And Matt's a father of two with his own experience in youth sport.
And in this podcast, we're going to focus on youth sports when parents are just introducing their sons to the sports. And Matt and I first met when he was coaching my brother in lacrosse at University of Delaware in the 80s. Good grief, Matt.
Well, it's a long time ago, Susie. A lot of things have happened since then. And that was a great experience for me. I really enjoyed. I still stay in touch with him, and Randy Powers, one of his good friends. I've been back to a lot of Delaware stuff, and that was a great experience for me.
So, Matt, you're going to appreciate this question. You know, my brother, you know him, had a ton of energy and was very physical right out of the gate as a little kid. And I remember my mom saying he was literally swinging off the curtains. And when he was around 4, when he was young, and she exclaimed to my dad, "Something has got to be done." And so they enrolled him in Pee Wee football, and it channeled his energy, which was a lot, into sports moving forward, which was a win for everybody in the house, especially me, because I was his favorite wrestling.
Yeah, right.
So, at what age do you recommend introducing kids to sports? And are there, traits or tendencies parents should look for?
I think so. I think the first thing is, and I was a father of a child very similar to Steve, and I remember being exasperated talking to my mother about it. And she said, "Would you rather have him being the way he is, or a child you'd have to motivate to get off the sofa?" So those
Hmm.
parents who are at their wits' end with a hyperactive or overactive child, I would rather have that than the alternative. I think introducing sports to your child is different for all of them, and I think you're seeing it younger and younger and younger now. I remember my son gravitated to it, wanted to play, wanted to do it. My daughter, the first time she played soccer, she just stood still. She didn't even
Hmm.
move, and it infuriated me. And my wife really had to, like, Matt, just stop. Um, so I think it's individual development, but I think you're seeing in kindergarten and first grade, kids are being introduced. We run a program for pre-K lacrosse players,
That's
and
crazy.
Wow.
it's really, really young. And the guy who runs it for me, Jake Baxter, does a phenomenal job. It is nowhere close to what I saw, how it was going to be done. And he does it, and those kids have a blast. It's an
Hmm.
hour, it's quick, but it is, they have so much fun. And he's not trying to teach them necessarily how to catch and throw and do a face dodge. It's just having fun, and so they enjoy the sport. I would say if your child wants it, obviously let them do it. But two is, if you think they need it, I think kindergarten, first grade is not too early. If it's the right, I think every level has its own level of intensity or lack of level of intensity. And what's the purpose and the philosophy of the program you put your child in? And I think that's really important.
What is your philosophy with coaching with young kids?
First thing, the most important thing, and this is what I say to we call it Young Guns program, and even younger, up to probably our fourth grade. your number one responsibility as a coach or a director of a camp or a clinic, whatever it is to create the environment that they want to return, that they
Hmm.
want to keep playing. And our whole goal there is to make sure this is fun. Now, that doesn't mean you can't hold them accountable, right? Fun and accountability aren't necessarily, those can be the same thing. So I think, and I had that conversation with my club, and I was talking to a coach this morning about it, is that our expectation is that we win everything. Our club's really good. So when we win, there's very little rejoicing because that's an expectation. And we have tried in our younger teams remove the word winning. It's about playing, giving great effort, and wanting to come back. So our philosophy for younger kids is make sure the coach create the environment they want to come back and play again.
So, Matt, I wrote a book called Mothers of Boys Survival Guide, and I call my two boys Ernest and Exuberance. And Ernest, who was my older son, played baseball. And I got to tell you, sometimes those baseball games can go on forever. It's like, um, and at that point, the coaches were other parents. And then a few years later, we sent him to Cal Ripken Camp, and the coaches were, professionally trained, had much different experience, and it was a different experience for him and for us to watch the games. So, what are the realistic expectations a parent should have for a volunteer coach versus a professional coach, or are they the same?
That's my response to that is I don't think your experience differed because one was a volunteer and one was paid. I
Hmm.
think your difference in your experience was one was good and one wasn't so good. And I think as a club director of 65 coaches, um, our dads are basically volunteers and we have non-dads who we pay. And I have to mentor, I have to guide both the volunteers and the paid coaches. And I have fired dads and I have fired paid coaches.
Yeah.
So I think the challenge is I've seen bad paid coaches and I've seen bad volunteers and I've seen great paid coaches and I've seen great volunteers. So I think it's more of who was the coach, what is he doing, and that probably changes by the level. Is we
Hmm.
talked about earlier is it more about having fun and teaching skills versus more game strategy? Every level I've been a parent, and it's been from kindergarten through college. I've had a parent come to me and try to get me to rally against the coach every time. And my son was in first grade or kindergarten. A parent, what position do you think your son should play? And my response was, whatever the coach tells him to play. I know she felt my son should be an attackman. He was a midi, but I said, if it's goalie, it's goalie. It doesn't matter. And she was very upset with me because I wouldn't rally. And it happened in college too. So I think it just matters how good that coach is, whether they're paid or not paid. But I do think we all need to have more tolerance as parents for coaches and more
Hmm.
compassion for them. It's a tough job to try to balance and satisfy everyone's individual goals is extremely difficult. And it's even more so when there's a great difference in abilities on the team. The greater difference between the first and the 22nd player, the more difficult it is as a coach. We need more tolerance for them. And the coach is not the one to be blamed for everything that your son is not getting done. It's most, and they talk this a little later on, but we need to have more compassion. We need to have more tolerance. We need more patience with our coaches.
Yeah. And I mean, typically you see that really wide range younger too,
Correct.
because that's, yeah,
And that's one of the
when some
challenge.
kids are so fast in first grade or second grade, and then somebody's not fast at all or not coordinated at all.
And that happens more with the rec, right? But it still
Yeah.
happens in our club. We have some
Yeah.
for some of our teams, and that we've talked about that is that the closer the ability is between the best and the last player on the depth chart, probably the
Hmm.
more homogeneous your team is and the easier it is for practices. But I think we all need to have a little more patience with our coaches and officials
Yeah.
and officials.
What's your recommendation for how parents should communicate with the coaches regarding that if they are unhappy with a decision?
we as a club, we tell the parents straight up, our number one responsibility is to develop this team. Our second responsibility is develop your son, but the team comes first. I This is something I started doing, but you being as a parent being unhappy with a coach's decisions. My advice is, and this is hard, and I started doing this in high school, probably after my fourth year. We had our parent meeting. What I would say to the parents is, I'm not asking you to agree with all the decisions I make. You're not going to. There's no way. All of you are going to agree with everything I do. I don't agree with everything the coaches of my children do. But I'm asking you to be supportive of my decisions to your child.
Hmm.
If you are not I used to say my biggest enemy in high school was the kitchen table.
Right.
That's what I had to fight, because the kid was being told by his mom or dad, you should be doing this. And the coach said, you should be doing that. When you do that as a parent, you put your child in a situation that he must choose between agreeing with his parent or agreeing with his coach. He
Hmm.
loses whatever decision he makes. He loses. Because if he agrees with his coach, who controls his playing time, he disappoints his parent, who he loves. If he agrees with his parent, he disappoints his coach, who controls his playing time. You as a parent have created an environment that your child loses. He can't win. Now, one of the things we do now is for younger teams is we allow a player with a parent to come talk to the coach, but we want the player to do the talking. We understand at certain ages, a second grader is not coming to a coach and saying, why am I not playing? Right? That's not going to happen. He's got to come to mom and dad, even maybe up to fourth grade. So we allow that, but we want to be supportive.
Well, in a club sport, they're already a little bit more serious about it, right?
I,
So versus like little league or like pee wee football, or so it's am I am I right in that assumption? Like,
I,
would it be any different if it was pee wee football or
I
little
think if it's
league?
I think if it's rec, like my thing to my kids, when my kids complained about a coach, what I said was, you need to go talk to the coach.
Hmm.
And they would say no. And I said, then stop complaining. Either
Okay, that's
you have
good.
the
Yeah.
right, you have the chance. You have a problem. I'm giving you a solution to fix the problem, and you're not taking that solution. Then I don't want to hear about it. I think
Hmm.
those are the life lesson things that we're losing in sports now. It used to be you played sports because you want to build up these individual characteristics of teamwork and commitment and sacrifice. Well, when it's all about the individual and you don't put your kids in tough situations, you're not building those characteristics, you're not building growth. So I think one thing to remember as a parent, the greatest growth is in adversity. We don't grow a ton from not experiencing adversity. We grow the most as a human being, as an individual, as a young boy, as a young man, when we deal with and face adversity.
Right. What if you have a coach that's like yelling so much or being, you know, seems like they're crazy over the top? I'm not letting
No,
go of this conversation quite yet
yeah, no.
because there's so many different scenarios, and maybe you have a kid that's a little bit more sensitive, but
I
they
was a
like the
yeah,
sport.
yeah.
So,
I was a yeller. Um, as a coach, I had a parent a couple years ago. To my coaches say the guy yells the entire game. I went to the game. He talks the entire game. He coaches the entire game. He's loud. He's not
yeah.
negative. He's
Hmm.
telling the kids what to do. And I wrote the email to the parents. He's coaching because someone's going to yell at your son sometime, somewhere, and that necessarily doesn't mean it's bad. Now, if they're out of control, they're abusive, their language, those kinds of things are different than someone who's just loud and yelling. So I
Hmm.
think when is that going to be okay? So I think be careful. Just because someone's loud doesn't mean it's inappropriate. And if your son can't deal with that, and the other players in the team do deal with that, who needs to change? Maybe it's your son. Maybe it's not the coach, right? So just because your son doesn't react well to something doesn't mean the people around him need to change. Maybe he needs to change and adapt.
So, Matt, when, and this is more, I think, of a younger kid, question, but, you have a child. I used to make the kids beg me to do something. Like if they wanted to,
Right,
they wanted
right,
to be in soccer or lacrosse, whatever, it's like, you're going to have to beg me. And then we'll, it's usually for social reasons they wanted to do it,
right.
not for the exercise part of it. But so let's say your son has convinced you to sign him up for a new sport, and you've gone out and you've bought all the gear that's related to it. And after one practice, they come home and throw themselves down and say, "I hate it."
Yep.
What's your advice? Do you push them through and say, "Don't be a quitter," or you cut your losses and sell it on Facebook?
I think I think I think it's great that you made your kids made sure your kids wanted to do something before they just did it.
Hmm.
I think there's some real value in that, and ask for a level of commitment, and maybe tell them ahead of time, if you do this, you're doing the whole thing. I remember
Hmm.
I was a swimmer in the summer, and then my mom put me in winter swimming, AAU swimming, and I was in third grade or younger, and I hated it. I didn't like it, didn't want to do it. So I still remember to this day that I was in the car and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And she said, that's fine. When the season's over, you can stop doing this.
Hmm.
I think once you start it, finish it. And I think it's that way. And I also think it's just because on a whim, your child comes home and says, I want to play ultimate frisbee now, doesn't mean you play ultimate frisbee. Why? Do you understand? We got to practice 2 days a week. We got to do this. We got to travel. That means you're going to miss some social stuff. So make sure your child wants to do it first. But I think if you start it, you finish it, and then you can go move on to something else.
Yeah, the parent has to be tough and be willing to stick with that and not give in.
It's okay for your child to struggle, and it's okay for them to be unhappy with the decision you make. Right? Like like I see in parenting now is whatever they want, they get, and that's dangerous. That's
Yeah, there's growth in being uncomfortable.
a
Yeah,
100%.
yeah,
The greatest
absolutely.
growth is being uncomfortable, and sometimes
Yeah.
it's hard. I remember my wife and I having some conversation with our kids, and like she was raised in a family of girls and didn't play sports, and I was raised in a family of 7 boys and 1 girl, and we all played sports, and we all wrestled and beat each other up and had fights and all
I know
that
your
kind of
mom
stuff.
should be on this
Oh,
show.
if she was still living, she would be great for this. But you're right. It's just it. But our agreement with how we raised our kids was so on. But I do remember having a conversation with our kids and her leaving, going, "That was really hard. That was really
Hmm.
hard. Right? That was hard." Um, so I think it's okay to keep your kid to make your kids uncomfortable and not want to do something and grow from that.
Hmm.
Hmm. So I think that there's so many great reasons, obviously, for getting your kids involved in sports, and they're going to be active and they're going to be social, and hopefully build some self-esteem. But when you see that it's affecting their self-esteem in a negative way because they're never played, or they're never put in the position that they really want to try, what what's your advice for parents in that situation?
If you really want to build self-confidence and self-esteem in your child, make them do things they don't want to do, and give them
Hmm.
chores, give them things to accomplish, give them things to get done. If your child's experience is just bad, right, get them out of there. But I
Hmm.
think you need to evaluate what that bad is. And I've had that where I've had parents and I've said to them, I think your child should go. This is not the right fit, right?
Hmm.
Whether because I can see they're not having the right level of experience that they want, and I think that's really important as a coach. And I've said this before to kids in college, more in high school, more than younger kids, is that look, you're unhappy, or you don't agree with this leadership, you don't agree with me, you don't like what I do, you should go. I want you happy. Go somewhere else.
Hmm.
And I've had that as a club with my young kid players with their parents who call and complain about playing time, about how we do things, about our philosophy. What I say to them is, I used to argue with them and defend us. What I say is, you know something? This is the wrong fit.
Hmm.
You, sh- I want you happy. You're not happy with me. You don't like what I do. You should go somewhere else. And it normally flips the conversation. And the parent normally says, well, we don't want that. And then I say, then get on board, right, with what we're doing. But I'm giving you the opportunity to go because it doesn't work.
What if it's like second grade, again, rec league, and everybody's paying their $65 for the season? What's your advice with
Yeah,
that situation?
I think you have to evaluate your son or as if the experience is so detrimental, he needs to go. I had a player in this Young Guns thing who wouldn't do this drill, and I
Hmm.
was getting a little, and I have to really pump myself up when I work with little guys to be nice, right? I have to work really hard, not to yell, not get angry, and not get frustrated. And I was getting a little frustrated with him. And finally, I knelt down and I looked at him in the eye, and he was on the verge of tears.
Hmm.
I was like, "Oh boy, hold on." And I said, "Just do what you can." He goes, "I can't do this." I said, "Just do what you can." And he couldn't do it. And he tried. He was getting more frustrated. The next day, I got an email with the parent saying he's probably not going to come back. The parent was very, very supportive of us, but he was not having a good experience. He was on the verge of tears the entire hour that he was there. That's probably time to go, right?
Hmm.
Now he did finish. I shouldn't say he did finish the 4 hour segments he signed up for. He signed up for another other 4 1 hour segments. I believe trying to work through these uncomfortable situations. You said, Earl, I'm 100% agree with that. But you as a parent have to dictate when and know your child best when it's time to
Hmm.
cut loose and go.
Right.
So Matt, my two boys, Ernest and Exuberance, Ernest was not aggressive and a bigger kid physically and really good in defensive positions in soccer and lacrosse, but was not aggressive. Whereas Exuberance, who weighed uh, air, I mean, he was the equivalent of air. You could blow him
Right.
and he would fall over, was very aggressive, very excited about playing, the sports. And it was really difficult as a parent to balance both of them, where Exuberance was wanting to be, my brother, who was an All-American lacrosse player, and he just physically wasn't going to get there. And that was not a reality for him. So supporting him as a young kid in this sort of situation was tough because he was unrealistic and he thought he was going to be an all-American lacrosse player.
Right. How do you handle that as a parent? I think that's really hard, right? I
Yeah.
think it, and I've the and the physical part of it. Everyone grows and matures, whether it's academically, athletically, physically, maturity wise, at different stages in their lives. And I've had players who play for my club in ninth grade who want to play Division 1, and inside I'm saying, "You ain't got a shot."
Yeah.
But
Right.
but I'm careful. I don't say that, and then all of a sudden he he grows up and
Hmm.
he goes to play on Division 1 and plays professionally. So I'm really careful about managing those expectations that kids have. Shoot for the stars, dude. If you think you want to play in college, go shoot for it. And I think there's probably a place for you somewhere if you want to keep playing and and love playing it. But I think managing expectations is as a parent always a challenge and a balancing act. Right now in first, second, third grade, the little guys dominate because they can all remove, they can all run. The big guys haven't grown into their bodies yet. And the little guy may be a little guy when he's in 12th grade. He may not be so fast anymore. So to predict that stuff at a young age is impossible, I think. But I do believe that you have some patience, manage those expectations, but why not shoot for the stars if you want to shoot for the stars?
And what do you think about a kid playing two sports in one season?
I don't. I believe in playing in multiple sports. My children played soccer, basketball, and lacrosse, and I'm 100% behind playing as many sports as you can. They played those in youth. My daughter played them all in high school. My son played soccer. One year, my son wanted to play indoor soccer and basketball. And my wife and I were like, no, no. Basically because of our schedule more than anything else. And the other one was that it goes back to the level of commitment. We knew there was going to be conflicts. So he couldn't be committed to both of those things if there was a conflict. Early on, there was a conflict. You had a soccer game and a basketball game scheduled at the same time. And we told him, you're going to basketball because that's your in-season sport. And he wanted to go to soccer. And it was a battle. I mean, crying, throwing things, upset. And I just said, if this is the way you're going to behave, then we're never doing this again. Right? This is why we said no. And your behavior is not helping your cause at all. So we never did it again. We never allowed our children to play two sports at the same time. I don't support playing two sports in the same season.
Yeah, especially juggling school.
Yes.
Yeah. So how about burnout? Or just, the child's playing the sport, maybe it's outside, weather's been bad for a long time, the thrill of the whole new team and the new jersey and the new number and everything wears off. Is there anything that you can recommend to parents to try to continue to keep momentum with motivation, or is there anything you do when you start to see that with your team to keep them motivated?
As our coaches, yes, make sure it's fun, and we do a lot. We do much more than I ever envisioned. We're practicing September and October 1 day a week at least. We're doing skill sessions during the week, twice a week if you want to come. We're playing tournaments in November. We're doing skill sessions in January, practicing 1 day a week in January and February, practicing 4 days a week. We're practicing 3 days a week and playing games March, April, and May. And then we have 4 tournaments in the summer. It's a lot. And
Hmm.
that has been parent driven. That has not been us. That's been parents saying, we want more. We had one coach that would once a week or once every 2 weeks, he'd play kickball. And the parents were irate because they wanted them to play lacrosse. And they won every tournament in the summer. They're like, great, that kickball's all the parents, the kickball's awesome, right? So I think one, make sure you're getting some breaks, right? I think
Hmm.
I think just
Make sure your child has downtime. So from the parent standpoint, make sure your kids are getting the downtime they need if they're starting to feel burnout.
let's not overschedule a child with face-off work, individual shooting work, seeing this person, this special person, this special person, this other coach, and this specialty guy, and going to this playing on 3 different teams.
Hmm.
Relax, right? And if your child wants more, give them more. But I'm very cognizant of burnout and doing too much.
Hmm.
And as a parent, you control that.
So, so Matt, what do you say as a mom? You're sitting on the sidelines and you have other parents screaming their heads off at the coaches, and how do you parent that? Do you say something to the other parent and say, really dial it back a little bit, and how what do you say to your child?
I think it would be great if parents let other parents or monitor other parents. It'd be great. I don't think that happens much. I had a grandmother this past year, a good friend of mine actually, um, go up to a parent during a game and say, "Stop! You're out of control." And she can do that. She has that personality and that kind of thing. I yelled to my child one time between they were in kindergarten and seniors in college, and I regret that one time. Um, my son was playing soccer and lacrosse. He's becoming a soccer guy in my mind, which I wasn't pumped about. And he fell on the ground and he stayed on the ground. And that's a soccer move. And I yelled, "Get up." And my wife looked at me and it was like, "You're dead." I'm dead. And I realized I shouldn't have said anything. So I think it's more likely that as a parent, If you're comfortable addressing the parent, go ahead. If you're not, then go to somebody in that program and let them know what's going on. So then they should address that.
Or we find the grandmoms to go and approach, because no one's going to shove a grandma.
Exactly. You hope.
You hope. So, well, this was a great conversation. I feel like we only touched on the surface of what we could talk about. So we would love to have you come back again.
I would enjoy that. This was great. I'm happy to help any way I can.
So, Matt, at the end of each one of these programs, we ask our guests to share a little mantra, a motto, something that a mom can say to herself as she's watching her young child, go start sports. What suggestions would you give?
Very good. It's a good question. I think one, as parents, remember you're watching. One of my greatest joys in my life is just watching my kids play. I loved it. Whether they were good or bad at it, I loved it, and I enjoyed that. So as a parent, one of the things I used to say to my kids and go to the field was, did you have fun?
Mm-hmm.
And that was about it. And the next, for yourself, after a parent, I think just remind yourself that you're there to watch your child play. You're not about trying to win championships. You're not about trying to make them a professional athlete. Whether they have success or don't have success, just enjoy watching your child play.
Yeah, be their greatest cheerleader.
Yes, and I think be supportive, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
My kids are all grown now. They're all I have adult children, and I really miss all those years. I miss them so much, of being on the sidelines, or there's a time that you don't have that anymore. So I love what you said, because it does come to an end, and you're going to miss it as a parent, because it's a really special thing to watch your child out there.
Just be. Yeah. What I answer your question, Susan, probably should say is just remind themselves to be a parent.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Matt, thank you so much for sharing your experiences as a father and a coach. You gave us great advice and insight, and we really appreciate your time today. To learn more about Matt's programs, visit Annapolis Hawks Lacrosse Club at AnnapolisHawks.com, or for lacrosse tournaments, visit HoganLax.com. And thank you all for joining us today. Follow The Mob on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and your favorite podcast platform. Be kind to yourselves, moms, and have a great week.